Whenever normal agencies prove inadequate to the task, and it becomes necessary for the executive branch of the federal government to use its powers and authority to uphold federal courts, the president's responsibility is inescapable.
That was back in 1957, and that was a speech being delivered from President Dwight Eisenhower at the time, where he was issuing an executive order stating that he was going to be using the National Guard and the United States military in the state of Arkansas. And I'm going to draw a lot of parallels to that and modern day President Donald Trump with what he plans on doing in Chicago and very likely many other cities and states across America as crime continues to spiral downwards and out of control. This video is going to be all about shattering the narrative that the liberals are spreading all over the internet about how Trump is finally unveiling himself as the dictator they all knew that he was, apparently, by using the National Guard in the way that he's doing. Claiming, of course, that this is unprecedented, we've never seen anything like this in history, and that he has absolutely no right to be doing it. All of which, of course, are completely false, and I will be going back to this Dwight D. Eisenhower speech, as well as covering the history of Little Rock, Arkansas, to showcase why Trump is correct in just a minute. But I want to preface this all by saying Chicago, currently, where Trump has his sights on, is an absolute disaster, and there's no denying it. In fact, while I was doing research and gathering all of the material needed to record this video, more news was breaking about crime in Chicago. This literally happened yesterday morning in broad daylight.
Right there. What is going on, man?
That's so wild. I was wondering what that was. That's really cool.
What you saw there was on a beautiful weekend morning, Chicago. You had people just decide, oh, what a beautiful morning. I'm going to go rob a Rolex store and steal $250,000 worth of watches in broad daylight. Yet, of course, Mayor Brandon Johnson will tell you that crime is not a massive problem and that the crime that does exist is all President Donald Trump's fault somehow. We'll cover him later on in this video as well, as the governor of Illinois, of course, J.B. Pritzker, also insistent upon the fact that crime is not a big problem, and in fact it's dropping in Illinois, so they don't understand what the issue is. But the citizens of Chicago tell another story, and I'm going to show all of that later on. But what I want to do first is present the argument that can be used against the liberal narrative that Trump is a dictator for using the National Guard to clean up the streets of Chicago. And it all goes back to 1957, Little Rock, Arkansas, a story called the Little Rock 9 that took place around the Central High School of the state. You can see this is in the Civil Rights Digital Library. I highly encourage you to go to this website and read the story. It is both heartbreaking as well as eye-opening, some of which I'll be exposing right now, like, for instance, the story centering around the governor of Arkansas at the time, Orval Faubus. And this is his information right here, 1957. Notice what party he ran under. Yes, this was a Democrat governor of Arkansas at the time. And the story behind all of this is desegregation was finally taking effect. It was a federal order being handed down by the government to all states across the board. At the time, Dwight D. Eisenhower was the president, a Republican president, mind you. And some states just didn't like this. Arkansas putting up one of the biggest fusses under Governor Orval Faubus, who delivered multiple speeches insisting that he wouldn't comply with desegregation and fighting, in fact, for segregation to stay the norm in his state. This all centered around the Central High School at the time, where 9 African-American children were simply trying to go and attend school on a day-to-day basis. Of course, Governor Orval found the idea of allowing black children into a predominantly white high school to be absolutely disgusting, so much so that he decided to use his state's own National Guard to create a barrier around the high school and prevent the children from entering the school. And this went on for a couple of weeks before it wound up gaining national attention and catching the eyes of Dwight D. Eisenhower himself, who wound up addressing the matter completely.
Whenever normal agencies prove inadequate to the task, and it becomes necessary for the executive branch of the federal government to use its powers and authority to uphold federal courts, the president's responsibility is inescapable. In accordance with that responsibility, I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas. This became necessary when my proclamation of yesterday was not observed, and the obstruction of justice still continues.
And following through on his promise that he made in front of all of America on national television from within the president's office in the White House, President Dwight D. Eisenhower would seize control of the National Guard in Arkansas and use them against the Democrat governor of Arkansas, Governor Orval Faubus, instead of using the Guard to block the school and deny access to the Little Rock, Arkansas 9 African-American children who are simply trying to get an education and attend school on a daily basis. President Dwight D. Eisenhower turned the tables by using the National Guard instead to secure entry for the 9 African-American children. And he also doubled down, Dwight D. Eisenhower did, by sending the Airborne Division, yes, the full-blown United States military, not just the State National Guard, where the Airborne Division personally escorted the 9 black children into the school and out of the school every single day. And so this is basically the counter-argument to the current mainstream media liberal overlord narrative that you see parroted by the more mindless liberal voters nowadays all over social media, insisting that President Donald Trump is a tyrant for sending in the National Guard to Chicago to clean up crime. He's a tyrant for doing this to Washington, D.C. Yes, the liberals are actually arguing in favor of crime remaining in their cities. That's how bad it's gotten within the liberal party. That's how bad the delusion, the Trump derangement syndrome is. They are now protesting in the streets and demanding that the National Guard be removed, insisting that we free D.C. and free Chicago. Keep your hands off Chicago. Everything's fine here. We're just losing around 15 people a week to gun violence. That's the Liberal Party message. All the while, the president does in fact have a duty to protect the American citizens, even if it means on a domestic front. And as the commander-in-chief, he absolutely has control over the military. And furthermore, the argument here is that it's not unprecedented even for the president to seize control of the National Guard and send them into American cities when absolutely necessary, as we've seen Dwight D. Eisenhower do very clearly in the past, back in 1957. Fast forward to the modern day, and we have President Donald Trump essentially saying the same thing. And while he's not doing it purely for racial crime aspects, though I'm sure racial crime is very prevalent in Chicago, he is doing it for the safety and benefit of the American citizens he presides over, and he is doing it in rather extreme circumstances, just knowing how bad Chicago has gotten.
Mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks, and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe. Everyone likes you anyway. They probably wouldn't do it.
Of course, President Donald Trump would go on in a less elegant fashion than what we saw with Dwight D. Eisenhower all those years ago to put a reporter in her place for deliberately spreading misinformation and reporting in a fake news style right here. This is just all too entertaining to watch.
That's fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why would
I
you
don't
the
go to
Department of
war.
Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second rate. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
This is really all that it's about. Of course, the liberals insist that this is a political stunt on the president's part to own the libs. You see, the liberals are so full of narcissistic traits as a collective whole that all they can focus on is the image, the look, the appearance of things. So all they see is President Donald Trump dunking on fat slob J.B. Pritzker, and they can't stand it. When the truth of the matter is, Chicago's crime is out of control, and all you have to do is literally type in on any search bar, on any social media platform, or Google itself, or YouTube, Chicago crime, and you will see examples that will blow your mind. Chicago is like another country right now. It is like a third world country right now. The gun violence is out of control. And when you have incompetent, leadership in the state and city, then the president must step in and use the National Guard. And that is the whole argument here that I am making. You see, liberals wouldn't dare speak out in any way that puts them in the appearance of being against African Americans. And so my argument is this. If you don't like that he's using the National Guard to simply clean up the city and prevent crime, then you certainly cannot stand behind what Dwight D. Eisenhower did in 1957, where he used the National Guard to enforce desegregation, to end racial crime, and to allow the students into the building because, according to you, what Dwight D. Eisenhower would have done back in 1957 would have been a deliberate overreach, overstepping the powers that were placed in the hands of Democrat Governor Orval Faubus. You cannot have it both ways. And that is the entire argument here. All of this being presented, of course, to highlight the complete liberal hypocrisy. Now, of course, fast forward to present day once again from Little Rock, Arkansas. We don't have a Democrat Governor Orval Faubus, but we do have a Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker.
To tell the president that his proposed actions will make our jobs harder and the lives of our residents worse. Earlier today in the Oval Office, Donald Trump looked at the assembled cameras and asked for me personally to say, "Mr. President, can you do us the honor of protecting our city?" Instead, I say, "Mr. President, do not come to Chicago." You are neither wanted here nor needed here.
And so what you see here is just a modern day version of Democrat Governor Orval Faubus. All those years ago, as a last resort, Orval Faubus reportedly stood in the doorway of the Central High School in one last desperate effort to attempt to block the black children from entering his school despite being escorted by the military and protected by the National Guard. And here in this modern day example, you have a very large, out of shape man who no doubt would have blocked the entire doorway of the school, delivering a very public speech where he flat out says, "Do not come to Chicago, President Trump. We do not need you." And you see, in contrast to Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago, who have basically tried to deny Trump entry into the state and city to clean up crime, you also had Governor Orval Faubus back then do this, which highlights the very fact that liberals really haven't changed all that much over the decades. You see, after not getting his own way in his own state and city with Central High School and being forced eventually to allow desegregation to occur, being forced to allow and watch 9 African-American children be permitted to attend his Central High School, Governor Orval Faubus, in a very salty, liberal, typical fashion, decided that the next year, the entire Central High School would be closed. You can see holding up the sign here, the school is closed, and at the direction of Governor Orval Faubus, the school remained closed all year, which is now historically known as the lost year, where tragically hundreds of students simply just did not receive an education, all because Governor Orval Faubus couldn't swallow his own ego enough to accept defeat. And it's no different than the modern day politicians like Mayor Brandon Johnson here. Let's show some of the hypocrisy of this mayor. The first half of the video on the left here highlights his campaign speech back in 2023, where he insistently said he had all of the answers on how to solve crime in Chicago. And then the right half of this video that will play afterwards shows you how he views crime in Chicago now with President Donald Trump in office in 2025.
We can actually solve crime in the city of Chicago with my plan. We will never be able to end gun violence in Chicago as long as the president continues to allow tens of thousands of guns to be trafficked into our state and our city.
And so you can see right there, I can't even help but laugh because, I mean, this guy must have the IQ of a dog. 2 years as the mayor, he hasn't been able to quell crime. Mind you, he was voted in as mayor under the Biden regime. On top of that, he somehow tries to pin it on Trump. It's Trump's fault that guns are being smuggled into his city. The mayor in charge of Chicago, but it's Trump's fault. The man who's literally sending ICE in to remove the illegal aliens who are smuggling the guns into his city, but it's Trump's fault. What a moron. I want to end this video by first and foremost telling you to subscribe to American Advocates right now, unless you're a slimy liberal viewer who's so out of shape that you view Governor J.B. Pritzker as a fitness goal and you're secretly hoping to lose 100 pounds so you can look like him. If that's you, please dislike this video and never come back. But these are the citizens of Chicago being interviewed on their thoughts when it comes to President Donald Trump sending the National Guard in to clean up crime.
It's just gone from bad to worse to disaster.
No one really feels safe. It's impossible to feel safe in a city like this. especially with the leadership we have.
These kids are carrying guns like around the ages of 8 years old, and they're killing other 8-year-old kids with guns. It's insane.
My opinion, not enough police officers. The police officers' hands are tied.
So the police is really unappreciative for offhand under Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, J.B. Priester. Those are three are the reason why nobody don't want to be a police. Their policies when it comes to crime is not working at all.
I think the biggest piece of the pie has to be more police officers, more protection. That's what the people want.
Send this video to a crybaby liberal who thinks that Trump is overstepping his bounds by using the National Guard to clean up the streets of Chicago and very likely Baltimore, Portland, Oregon after that, maybe Philadelphia. A lot of these liberal-run cities really need this. And the liberals, despite the fact that they're insisting it is executive and federal overreach, probably don't even know the story of Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. And when they do find it out, you'll find it very funny to watch them squirm at the idea of either having to be in favor of both scenarios happening, of both presidents using the National Guard, or of neither. But what are your thoughts and opinions on all of this? Leave a comment down below with what you think, and thanks for watching.